Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, today we will discuss the fifth concept in the leadership. And as we discussed last time, that we started with the history and evolution of the leadership theories. And then we discussed a very fundamental approach of traitist theories, the traits theory, which was mainly based on the fact that the leaders are most of the time born and they have some innate and inborn qualities. But this approach was then not supported by many subsequent researchers, and they mainly objected that the even if we believe that the leaders are born not made, then even then we cannot have any can't have a resolution on the uh, common traits and characteristics of the leaders which can be followed. Again, the traitist theory cannot explain the uh, interaction with the followers, the task importance, and the relationship between the leaders and the followers and the situations. Later on, this theory was replaced by another approach, and that was called skills approach. That instead of traits, we can also develop the people for leadership. And again, the leadership is a process, and the people can be developed to become leaders. So it was the next approach was that leaders are made, not born, that leaders have to be developed for the situation and for the challenges in hand. And again, the leadership approach can't be unique in all kinds of circumstances. Now, the various kinds of skills which were initially defined were divided into three major types of skills. That is the technical skills, which is mostly required at the entry level management and leadership roles. And then the second was human skills, that would be skills while dealing with the people and the human side of the teams. And the third was conceptual or higher order skills in which the leadership at the executive level would need to have these skills. Now, the requirements of these skills vary from role to role and from level to level, but definitely as you move up, your technical skill requirement would reduce, but certainly your human and conceptual skills would be more important. Then this was traded for about 3 to 4 decades, and then we have the behavioral school of thoughts, in which we have three important studies. And the background of this approach was that leaders are trading off between the care for the task and goals and care for the people and team members. And this trade off between the care or concern for production and concern for people is basically then traded as the leadership or the leadership process. In the behavioral school of thought, we could see three important schools. What was one was the Ohio State University School of Thought, and then there was a Michigan uh, School of Thought, and then it was followed by Blake and Newton, the famous managerial grid approach, in which the management style and the leadership styles were divided into uh, five different kinds of combinations between the concern for the people and concern for the task. And based on this grid, a graphical representation of various leadership styles, the leaders could see and combine to see that what can be the best style in a particular circumstances. But anyhow, the objection or criticism on the behavioral school of thought were again that though it was having emphasis on both the human and the task side of the leadership, but it failed to develop the interaction and relationship between these two, and more importantly, the outcomes and assessment of outcomes. So, this was followed by another school of thoughts or a school of leadership theory, which we call a situational approach. Now, the situational approach is seems to be more realistic in the sense that leaders would definitely assess the situation, the nature of the task, the environment, and of course the qualities of the followers. And based on the assessment of these three attributes, the environment, the task, and the followers, the leaders would then definitely decide his or her style of leadership. Now, this seems a bit natural because it gives a leverage to the leaders to come up with a variety of leadership styles while keeping in mind the ground realities, the followers' capacity, the task complexity, and the environmental, both external and internal situations. So, all these together would make finally the leaders to discuss and select the best leadership approach they can. Now, this is a case study before we go into the details of the situational theory of leadership. I leave it to the readers. Basically, this is a leadership approach to different three kinds of the marathon runners and three different sets of the runners who are being trained for the marathon race, New York City marathon race. Now, all these three have different attributes, the followers and mm, the coach of the marathon runners are using different kinds of approaches for different sets of the. Now, the approach was basically developed by Hersey and Blanchard, and it was based on the earlier work of Reddens in 1967, and this is sometimes called a 3D management style theory. The situation approach has been refined and revised several times since the inception, and it has been used extensively in organizational leadership training and development. So, basically, in many training programs and leadership assessment programs, the leadership is normally assessed in different kinds of situation, and even in the psychological test and the leadership test, like ISSB in the army, you are placed in a situation where you are advised to decide the most appropriate decision, and the situation which is created around for the leaders depend on the various attributes. Now, the premise of the theory is that different situations demand different kinds of leadership. From this perspective, to be an effective leader requires that a person adapt his or her style to the demands of different situations. So, this is the basic essence of this approach, that not a single leadership style can be useful and successful in all circumstances, And certainly, the leaders have to analyze the situations and then decide the best leadership approach. Now, the situational approach is illustrated in the model developed by Blanchard et al., called the Situational Leadership Model or SL2 model. To determine what is needed in a particular situation, a leader must evaluate her or his followers and assess how competent and committed they are to perform a given goal. Based on the assumption that followers' skills and motivations vary over time, situational leadership suggests that leaders should change the degree of which they are directive or support. So that would depend certainly on the nature of the task as well as the followers' capacity to deal with the challenge, and based on that, the leaders would be changing their style from more directive to more supportive, depending on the nature of the situation. Now, this is very interesting, and I believe that this is the main. Uh, uh, if you can see this chart or this figure, this is illustrating the basic philosophy or approach of the leadership styles, and it has been done between two variables. The one is the uh, directive behavior, and the other one is supportive behavior. For example, if the leaders uh, are having highly directive powers, then they will be highly directive and less supportive. But when they move to the uh, other side, for example, they may be highly directive and at the same time highly supportive. This is a coaching style. So the first one, S1, in which the leader is highly directive and less supportive, is directing. And the other option is that he or she is at the same time both high supportive and highly directive, and this is a coaching style. And if the directive component is then reduced, but it is very supportive, then a supporting style. And if both the directive behavior as well as the supportive behavior both are minimum, then we come to the delegating style. Now, for what kind of followers, the development of followers, this will work. For example, if we go to the first D1, the followers are of low competence, but they have high commitment. And normally, at the entry level, when the people are appointed to the new positions, they are very committed, but unfortunately, since they are the newcomers, they don't have much competence. So, for this kind of, which is called development level D1 by the Blanchard, uh, and this has been taken from leadership in 1 minute manager, increasing effectiveness through situational leadership, like two model by Blanchard and Zigarmi and D. Zigarmi, P. Zigarmi and D. Zigarmi in 2013 in New York. So the D1 level would definitely need directive kind of leadership, and the leader would be more directive in the sense that they would give them tough tasks, they would develop them, they will give them tough timelines, and they will try to develop their capacity, and they will capitalize upon their commitment. But as the followers and their development improves, then the leaders move to the D2 level of leadership style, in which they are both directive, but at the same time they are also flexible in the sense that they give them more supports and they give them more space. And this is a coaching, just like a coach who is very hard on his timeline and very hard on his practice, but at the same time he's taking care of the health and convenience of the players. So this is the D2, where the competence is a bit improved, but the commitment is not very high. uh, and definitely when the followers come to the mid levels, their competence no doubt improve, but the commitment is somehow decreasing. Now, uh, in the third level of development, we have the uh, high supportive and less delegative directive, and this is the conditions where the uh, followers have developed some moderate to high competence, and their commitment is varying between low and medium, and therefore uh, the leaders would be using supportive kind of leadership style in which they will use less authority, less directions, and more support. And then finally, when uh, the followers get high level of competence, and they are at the same time highly committed. These are normally the senior management capable leaders who are having both the high competence and high commitment. And definitely, the leader or the chief executive would not be interfering much in the affairs of these leaders, and they will empower them and they will delegate the powers to them so that they can dispose of. So, for different kinds of the followers attributes in terms of their competence and commitment, there are four type of situations and there are four types of leadership styles, and this I think is the basic crux of the leadership situation analysis. Now we discussed the development levels that there are different levels of the development for the followers. We discussed that the D1 followers are new and they don't know exactly about how to do the work, but definitely they are highly committed. But the D2 followers are the people who have got some competence, they learn some job, but they also lose some of the initial motivation. But when they go to the mid level, then their competence goes up, but their commitment is from low to medium. And then finally, we have the highly committed and highly motivated and highly performing followers, for which we would suggest the delegating. Now, the behavioral approach, works in many ways. Uh, that, for example, what goals are followers being asked to achieve, and how complex is the goal, and are the goals followers sufficiently skilled to accomplish the goals? Do they have to desire to complete the job once they start it? And so answer to these questions will help leaders to identify correctly the specific development level in which the followers are functioning. So we can use this model to assess the development level of our followers, and then we can see that what particular leadership style would be most suitable for them. For example, a new followers who are very excited but lack understanding of the job requirements would be identified as D1 level follower. Conversely, seasoned followers with proven abilities or great devotions in the organization and would be identified as functioning at the D4 level. So, having identified the correct development level, the second task of the leader is to adapt the style to prescribed leadership style presented in this uh, model. So there is all they have given one-to-one relationship that for example, for D1, D2, S1, S2, and so on. For example, the followers on the first level of development, the leader would be more directive and low supportive, and they would give tough time to the new people so that they can adopt uh, to the to the tasks given to them, though they are committed, but they are not having much information. And secondly, it provides a straightforward approach that is easily used. For example, what particular leadership style will be required for a particular level of development or nature of the followers. Many theories of leadership are descriptive in nature. The situational approach is perspective. So this is one of another very important strength of this theory, that it gives you a prescription for different kinds of followers. The strength approach is that The flexibility of leadership style, as we believe that previously the leaders, in terms of skills and in terms of behaviors, were not very flexible, but certainly the situation leadership provide a flexibility between the delegation and the support. Uh, Leaders cannot lead using a single style. This is very important, and we discussed that the leader have to decide based on the circumstances, the nature of task, and complexity of the task, and at the same time looking at the follower capacity, their commitment, and their uh, uh, expertise. This approach recognizes that followers act differently when doing different goals, and they may act differently during different stages of the same goal. So, effective leaders are those who can change their own style based on the goal requirement and the followers' need, and even in the middle of a project. So, this also gives us a message that a single style may not work for the same team or uh, even for the same team throughout the project and learning process. Finally, it reminds us to treat each follower differently, and this is very important that it gives us a unique, that every follower has got a unique, attributes in terms of commitment and in terms of learning. Therefore, the organizations and the leaders have to deal them in a different way on the situations rather than behaviors. Now, still, despite of all these shortcomings, the situational approach has got very wide applications. For example, we already discussed that large corporations are using the situational approach uh, for the appointment of directors, uh, uh, and there is a lot of training programs based on the situational leadership model. So, situational leadership applies during the initial stage of a project when the idea formation is important and during the very subsequent phases of project. So, for project management and for project like environment, the situational leadership would give good results because during the life cycle of the project, the leaders may be changing their styles based on the learning and commitment of the team members. Situational leadership stresses adapting to followers. Yes, it is definitely gives you a room as a leader to assess the individual followers in terms of their commitment and competence and see that how can you adjust your particular style to the need of an individual. Given the breadth of situational approach is applicable in most any type of organization, so it can be used all type of goals and all type of organizations. So this is one of the. This is another case study, and I would not go into detail, but I will leave it to the readers. Now, this was a paper which was leadership style, gender, and job satisfaction, a situational leadership approach. This was written by the Department of Management Sciences, High Tech University, Texla, uh, and uh, the two authors were Shagufta Parveen and Adil Tariq. In providing effective education, leadership plays an important role. A leader can make his or subordinates satisfied or dissatisfied to the leadership style which he or she uses in most of situations which they face. There is a strong relationship between leadership style and job satisfaction of employees. Leader is a vital position in every sector of economy. To run the institutes of higher education, there is a need of strong leadership skills. The educational leadership must inculcate purpose in the faculty and support in enhancing the motivation. Results of this study show that leadership style and gender of head department have significant effect on job situation of faculty members. Selling style is used primary leadership style and participating leadership style is used as secondary style by head departments in all universities. Selling and delegating leadership style almost non-existent, and these are not preferred by heads of department in making overall decisions. So, as we discussed, that supporting and delegating are the two very important leadership style in which you keep on supporting the team and you delegate most of the powers to the team members. This study has explored the question: do gender and leadership style of heads of department of universities have an impact on job satisfaction of teachers and educational sector? And what are leadership styles of heads pursued by university teachers in different situations? This study has helped us to find out which specific leadership style affects the job satisfaction of teachers in a university, which specific leadership style is used by head of department, the difference in the perception of male and female teachers regarding leadership style of the head of department, and finally, how gender of head of department affects the job satisfaction of a teacher, a particular leadership style that is used by both male and female. So there were five questions: development and leadership style. You can just press. There are four situations, and are required to see all these four situations and then see what uh, possible way to address that situation. So, just summing up, it's a prescriptive approach to the leadership that suggests how leadership and leader can become effective in many different type of organizations setting involving in a wide variety of organizational goals. This approach provides a model that suggests to leaders how they should behave based on demand of particular situation. The situational leadership model 2, which is a registered model by Blanchard, classifies leadership into four styles, that is S1 high directive, low supportive, S2 high directive, high supportive, S3 low directive, high supportive, and S4 low directive, low supportive. The model describes how each of the four leadership style applies to the followers who work at different level of development. That is D1, which are low in competence but high in commitment. Then D2, low to some competence and low in commitment. And then D3, where moderate competence but lack of commitment. And D4, in which the competence and commitment both are very high. And in this particular case, definitely you will try to delegate the powers to the this kind of leaders. Effective leadership occurs when leaders can accurately diagnose the development level of the followers in a goal situation and then exhibit the prescribed leadership style that matches that situation. Leadership is measured in this approach with questionnaire that asks respondents to assess series of work-related situations, and then the questionnaire provides information about the leader's diagnostic ability, flexibility, and effectiveness. They are used in helping leaders to learn about how they can change their leadership style to become more effective across different situations. There are four major strengths of the situational approach. That first recognizes many a standard of training leaders. Second, it is practical approach, which is easy and understood and easily applied. Third, this approach sets forth a clear set of prescriptions for how leaders should act if they want to enhance their leadership effectiveness. And fourth, situational leadership recognizes and stresses that there is no one best style for leadership. Instead of leaders need to be flexible and adapt their style to the requirements of the situation. Now, a couple of criticism on the situational leadership. It has limitations. Unlike other leadership theories, this approach does not have a strong body of research finding to justify and support the theoretical underpinning on which it stands. As a result, there is ambiguity regarding how the approach conceptualizes certain aspects of leadership. It is not clear in explaining how followers move from developing level to developed level. Now it's clear on how commitment changes over time for followers. Without the basic research finding, the validity of the basic prescription for matching leader style to followers' development levels must be questioned. In addition, the model does not address how demographic characteristics affect the followers' preferences for leadership. Finally, the model does not provide guidelines for how leaders can use this approach in group setting as opposed to one-to-one context. So there are a couple of papers for the readers, and I would suggest that they read it and develop a critical review